Good day, everyone. We are now here to discuss our lesson 6. Our topic it is all about instructional planning cycle. Before we start our discussion, allow me first to introduce myself. I am Reljoy A. Gregorio, and I will discuss to you what is the instructional planning cycle. Instructional planning cycle. It is a systematic selection of educational goals and objectives and their design for use in the classroom. And also, the instructional planning cycle that the teacher should set the learning target of the objectives and also the learning attention of the learner. But we as a future teacher, we should think what is our instructional planning cycle to teach our children in a proper way, step by steps, and doing the process. There are the quotation about the teacher. If you are a great teacher, it is reflecting on their practices and keep the learning process. They keep building on their strength and working off their weaknesses. So, I will start to discuss to you about our topic tells about instructional planning cycle. The objectives of our topic in this lesson, you will able to identify the instructional planning cycle, explain how the planning cycle plays in the planning for instruction, and explore implementation techniques at each stage of the cycle. Here we are the introduction of our topic. The introduction of a planning cycle. In the previous lesson, we learned about the instructional component. But now, we learn about instructional planning cycle of the classroom and to our learner. We should think what is the importance of the planning cycle to our classroom and also our learner. We should think that every students or every children need to discuss in a proper way of a teacher. Also, we should think that the instructional planning cycle in this planning instruction, as mentioned earlier in the previous topic, it is the one thing of the fundamental skills of a teacher to teach their children. So, these are the figure shows that the instructional planning cycle that Ma'am Greza discussing. That's all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. For the continuation of the report of Ms. Gregorio, my name is Grisame Laurenti and I'll be the one to discuss to you the 4 instructional planning cycle. Are the 4 instructional planning cycles. So this figure below shows the instructional planning cycle. First is the learning objectives. Second is the assessment strategies. Third is the instructional activities. And last is the reflections. The process is adapted from the understanding by the design framework by Wiggin and McTighe, 2025. Employing the background design framework, the process enumerates the steps necessary in the planning of classroom instruction. So this instructional planning cycle was adapted from the understanding design framework of Wiggin and McTighe. And this instructional planning cycle was applying in the classroom instruction. First is the learning objectives. Learning objectives, at this stage, the teacher is compelled to ask, what should I teach my learners? This can be skills, knowledge, or values found in the curriculum document, need to be learned or must or mastered by the learners. It is here by the teacher decides the content of the lesson. So learning objectives, it is where before the teacher start his or her concept or topic, he or she going to make an objectives. Objectives, it is where the teacher will set a goal set a goal to the students. So he or she it is the target objectives of the teacher that at the end of that lesson he or she able to meet that goal. So for example, in making the learning objectives, it should be the three domains is present: the affective, the cognitive, and the psychomotor domains. So when we see learning objectives, it is where the student making a goal or making setting a goal to his or her student that at the end of the lesson or at the end of that teaching, at the end of the lesson or the discussion, it should be the learners meet that objectives where the teacher set for them. So next is the assessment strategies. After the teacher decides on the objective, he or she now need to identify how can learners demonstrate their understanding or identify achievement of the learning objectives. This is the form of assessment strategies that teacher needs to ponder. Here are: how do I know that my learners have achieved the objective of the lesson, and what will be the acceptable pieces of evidence of my learners' proficiency and understanding. This shall provide the pieces of evidence the teacher need to gauge whether the learners were able to absorb the lesson. When we see assessment strategy, it is where the teacher are making a strategy to identify the learners. If the learners is really understood the topic or student really meet the goal he or she set for them at that certain topic. Next is the instructional activities. At this stage, the teacher now begins to think about how to teach his or her learners. Here, the teacher will now plan for the teaching strategies and learning activities that will be used in the classroom. With the objectives set and the assessment strategies in place, the teacher would now need to think about the learning experience, information, and resources the learner need to achieve the goals of the lesson. When we say instructional activities, it is the activities where the teacher initiate to conduct to his or her discussion, so that in that way the children or the student will participate, and in that way the student will motivate and be able to understand some discussion he or she impart to them. So letting the student do some activities make enhance their so that in that way the teacher will be able to make his or her discussion enjoyable. And always put in mind that if you're doing or conducting some activities during your discussion or during your discussion, you make sure that that activity is related to the topic that you're going to teach to them. That activity is connected to the concept you're going to teach for your learners. Last is the reflection. Reflection. After the implementation of the instructional plan, the teacher then reflects about his or her teaching. At this stage, the teacher reviews what has happened at the implementation of the plan. Reflection is very important because the teacher, after the teacher doing his discussion, he needs to review or he needs to reflect to what has happened during his discussion, so that in that way he can really assess that his discussion is really effective. His or her discussion is really make the student learn from what he or she discussed. Also, by doing reflection or by doing this, the teacher will know what part he or need to improve. When we say reflection, it is reviewing or having review to what has done to your discussion. It is making for you to be able to know what really happened during your during the implementation of that plan. For your recap, so here are the four instructional planning cycle for the classroom instruction. So first is the learning objectives. It is very important to have a learning objective so that you can it is the settings of your goals that at the end of that lesson you the student should really understand or should meet that goal for your discussion. Second is the strategy, assessment strategy. It is very important also that as a teacher you need to assess the your learners. And third one is the instructional activities. So it is very also important to have conducting an activities during your discussion so that in that way that there is an interaction between you and the student. Then last is the reflection. It is very reflection. It is where you can review what has happened during your discussion or during the implementation of your plan for that certain discussion or certain classroom instruction or classroom discussion. I hope you've learned something from our topic. So God bless and have a good day, everyone.